Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 33 of the IWFM Navigating Turbulent Times series. I don't know where time's gone. I know it's coming towards the end of January, so I'm going to say Happy New Year to those members, viewers that I've not said Happy New Year to, and I hope you had a lovely Christmas. So today's episode is entitled, What's Your Leadership Style and How Does It Change Under Pressure? It's a very intriguing topic debate we're discussing today that's been driven by a lot of feedback from our audience over our previous episodes, and today's episode is certainly going to be good and certainly interactive. So just moving on, I'm Peter Brogan, Head of Research and Insight at the IWFM, and I know many of you have seen me on these webinars over the last previous episodes. But today, as I've just mentioned, today's episode is going to be very interactive, and we've got a great presenter today, Queen of Behaviours, Vic O'Farrell, Managing Director of Motivational Voice. At this point, before I hand over to Vic, I just want to make viewers, listeners aware this webinar is being recorded live and will be shortly available on the website. So please cascade to clients, friends, colleagues that couldn't make today's live episode. And also a reminder for the viewers, listeners that have joined us today, there is a dedicated Q&A section. So I would love you to send your questions and comments through on that. Through the question function through the software, and we have a dedicated section, as I mentioned. So at this point, enough from me, because you've come here to listen from Vic, not me, I'm pleased to know. So from that point of view, I'd love to hand over to Vic O'Farrell, who you see on your screens there, just to start off with an introduction about yourself. Vic, probably haven't given you enough service there, and then we're going to go straight into the webinar. But as I say, no spoiler alert, this is very interactive, folks, so get ready. Okay, Vic, over to you.
Thank you, Peter, and hello and welcome to everybody. These are strange times because when delivering a webinar like this, all I'm doing is talking to me. I can see that how many attendees are there, and it's great to see that many of you here. So yes, as Peter said, I am Vic O'Farrell. I am the Queen of Behaviours. Everything I do, I live, love and breathe about behaviours, core values, limiting beliefs, because that is what makes our personalities, and that's what makes us all different. So just from an FM perspective, I kind of fell into FM, like so many of us did, 1999, when I was running a building, because who knew that running a building was facilities management? But that's what it was. And all the way up until 2013, I was in FM and property. And then in 2013, I got fired. And so that was the kick that I needed to actually start my own business. And that's what I've done. So enough about me, but just wanted to give you that background about me and FM. Today's webinar, all about leadership. What is your leadership style and how does it change under stress and pressure? Because, well, let's face it, we've all had a lot of that, have we not, in these last 12 months, let alone the times before. But these last 12 months have put us under immense pressure. But we need to talk about, first of all, the first question I want to ask is, who decides who is the leader? Who makes the leader the leader? Well, it's actually not the leader, is it? We can all want to be out and be the leader, but without the followers, how are we leaders? So it's the followers that choose who is the leader. And then who chooses who stays and makes a great leader? Well, it's still the followers, and the new followers and more followers and followers who influence other people to follow the leader, because that's what it's all about. And the other thing about leadership, it's not about the title on your business card. It's not about, oh, well, the leader must be the CEO. They must be on the board, on the C-suite, a manager, because that's not the case either, is it? We are all leaders in our life. We all have people who look up to us, who follow us, who we influence. And that is what about leadership is. Because some people have actually said to me, well, Vic, surely it's, the personality thing. isn't it one particular type of personality that makes a great leader? Well, again, not is the correct answer. It's not about your personality. It's about the people that you influence and follow. So the first half of this webinar, I want to take you on a journey about personality types and what is your dominant style, so that you can understand what your dominant style is in your natural ability, and then think about how you change when you're under pressure. And pressure can come from all parts of our life. Now, I've got old school so that technology cannot let me down, and I hope you have pen and paper, because I'm going to get you to do a little exercise. So, if you have a pen and paper there, I'm sure you do, because we're FM, and we all have, notepads and notebooks. I want you to, on a piece of paper, from the top to the bottom, draw a line, a 10 at either end, and a 0 in the middle. Now I'm going to ask you a question. Would you say that you were outgoing or reserved? Now, imagine we were having a cup of coffee. Oh, remember that, when we could have a coffee? Imagining. But if we were having coffee, we're sitting together, and I've asked you that question: are you outgoing or reserved? Now, there'll be some of you on here who quite happily go, yeah, I'm outgoing. And there will be some of you that are, no, I'm reserved. And there will be some of you that will say, wow, Vic, that depends. And I get it, because it depends on who you're with, where you are, what you're doing, your environment, because your environment can impact on whether you are outgoing or reserved. It will impact on your behaviours. But for the sake of this exercise, because I'm just doing an overview, I want you to choose one or the other. Now, on your piece of paper where you've got your 0 in the middle, if you said that you were outgoing, on a scale of 0 to 10, I want you to mark on that line how outgoing you would mark yourself. And if you said that you were reserved, on a scale of 0 to 10, how reserved you were. So you've got a line on that axis somewhere. And now what I want you to do is draw a line across the centre of that 0, again, with a 10 at either end. And I'm now going to ask the question, would you say you were people-focused or task-focused? What do I mean by that? Do you get to the end of the day and think about all those people interactions that you've had, the phone calls you've had, the team meetings, the Zoom meetings, the webinars that you've been on, the people interactions? If you are going into the workplace at the moment, those people interactions that you've had, socially distanced, of course, but it's all about the people that you've met and the conversations that you've had. Or do you get to the end of the day and think about the tasks you've completed, the emails that you sent, the projects that started, the projects that completed, the things that you've ticked off your to-do list? So it's people-focused or task-focused. And again, if you sit there going, oh, that depends, for this exercise, I want you to just choose one. And on this scale of 0 to 10, how people-focused are you, that side, and how task-focused are you, this side? So you will now have a dot on this axis and a dot on this axis. And again, this is a high-level overview, because the one thing about profiling is there's no right or wrong answers. We are a blend of all of these styles. It's not about labeling people. It's not about putting people in boxes. It's just an understanding and an awareness, because when we understand and aware our own style, we can understand and have an awareness of the people around us and adapt our style accordingly. So you will now have your axis dotted. So if you said that you were outgoing and task focused, you'll have a dot somewhere in this section. If you said you were outgoing and people focused, you'll have a dot somewhere in this section. If you were people focused but on the reserved style, you will have a dot somewhere here in the S. And if you're reserved task focused, somewhere here in the C. And what does that actually mean? What does that mean? If I'm not putting you in a box fit, what are you doing? So this is where we talk about the terms of DISC. There are lots of profiling tools out there, but I use DISC and I fell in love with it for its simplicity. Dr. William Morton Marston wrote a book in 1928 called The Studies of Normal People. Everyone thought it was a little bit strange, because why would you study normal people? You can't sell normal people lotions, potions, or therapy. But that is what he did, and that is where the modern theory of DISC comes from. So this is dominant, influence, steadiness, and compliant. And the reason that I love DISC is because of all the great describing words. So no matter where you've put your dot, you'll actually be able to understand other people by thinking about the D style. The D style, they are people who are driven, the people who are determined. They're demanding of themselves as well as others because they're driven for the results. They're very direct, black or white, right or wrong. There's no grey area with them. They're also decisive because they'll make decisions. If you want an answer to something, go and ask your D star. You'll get an answer. Might not be the one you want, but you'll get an answer. And then what about coming over to here? Our I style, outgoing people, influence. They are inspirational. They see themselves as inspirational. They're influential because they can influence the decision of others by verbal persuasion. They're impulsive. If you've got an I style, you're bound to have something in your wardrobe that's got a label on it. Bought it in the sale, never going to wear it. You impulsively bought that. They're into people. They're interactive. They're incredibly impulsive, and they're inspiring, impressionable. And then we come down here to our reserved, but also people focused, steadiness. This is the status quo. This is about security, peace, and harmony. They are sensitive, not in terms of all, but sensitive to those around them. These make great diplomats because they take into consideration every other person's perspective. But they are the supportive ones. They like the status quo. And then we come over to here to see compliance. So this is our cautious corner. Critical thinkers. They are, let's face it, they're the clever bunch. They're compliant. They're consistent. And they consistently deliver because they're conscientious of being correct. Now, as I say, we're going to be a blend of all of this. So it's not about putting you in a box, but for this exercise, it's about understanding what our dominant style is. Because I want to think about, actually, we have some great strengths. You can always tell the D styles, it's be bright, be brief, be gone. You can tell the I styles, they're the storytellers. They're the people that no matter what you're talking about, they've always got a story about themselves, their friends, their family. They can relate it to anything. Quite frankly, there's no donkeys around them that have got any hind legs left. The S style, like I say, there are diplomats. They will see things from other people's perspectives. They will foster a team mentality. And our C styles, they'll quite frankly keep the rest of us out of prison. It's about the rules and regulations are there for a reason. It's about doing things correctly, competently, consistently. So that's the overview of how you can actually find out what is your dominant style. Old school, like I say, putting my pen and paper down there, because what I want to think about is all of those styles, they all come with greatness to an organization, and they can all be seen by others. The D style, their strength for bit driven for results. The I style, it's about generating enthusiasm and inspiration. The S style, it's about creating a team mentality and being in a secure environment, being sensitive to the others around them. The C, it's accuracy, it's high standards. But when that style goes under pressure, that is when we need to look at how that person will change. And do we know that we change? Because this is the other thing about pressure. When we can talk about it now, and I can talk about it now, I'm not under pressure. But actually, when other things impact my life and I go under pressure, I know that I change. Can I stop myself from changing? Can I be aware of my change and adapt my style? Well, I kind of do, because it's what I live and breathe, and it would be a bit silly if I didn't. But I want to actually put in a poll. I said, Peter said at the start, this is going to be really interactive. So I really would like to understand and put a poll in there about what style is your dominant style. And I get it, some of you might have been like, oh, I'm one or the other, but let's have a look at it. So as a reminder, whilst you bring the poll up, so outgoing, task focused, D, dominant, outgoing, people focused, I, influence, reserved, people focused, S, steadiness, and reserved, task focused, C, compliance.
So maybe like me, some of us had to run and get a pen and paper, but I was working along that as you went along, Vic. But yeah, we're going to launch a poll now. And just hasten to add, we're not going to trace this back to you kind individuals that have joined us, but it's really just what is your dominant style based on that exercise. So we're just going to launch the poll now, and hopefully then, as you can see, what is your dominant style? DISC, just one response for that. And I just gives us an understanding of the leadership or your behavioural style, I should say, of the mix of individuals we've got on the webinar today. So I'll just let that run for a bit, Vic, and then I will feed back the results and see the makeup of the individuals we've got on the webinar today.
And that is great. Thank you, Peter. And the nice thing about it being a poll is, like you say, I have no idea who's answered what, because it isn't about that labeling. It's not about going, oh, well, I don't want to put in that I'm a C style because I want people to think of me as a D style. It's not about that. It's just when we're honest with our style, we can adapt and behave with those around us.
And our lovely audience have listened to the instruction, and we've had 80% of our audience vote. So I'm just going to stop the poll there and then feed back if we can launch the results. So hopefully you can see that, Vic, as it comes on screen now. You can see that we've got 29% Ds according to our poll, closely followed by I's 26%. And then a tie, 22% S and C. So a very broad range of audience with, at the moment, indicating that we've got mostly Ds on our webinar at the moment. But again, as I say, that's interesting. And as Vic's going to go into the second segment, there isn't an actual right style, but intrigued. Any thoughts on those results, Vic? As I know this is a straw poll, and we've done it really as an exercise to understand who's on the webinar today. But any thoughts on that, Vic? Has that come as a surprise, or is there no surprises when it comes to this type of poll?
Well, there are no surprises when it comes to the results of polls. What I love to see is a nice blend, which is what we've got there, because we talk about in the world of work about how we need diversity, don't we, in terms of, you know, people and cultures and things like that. But we also need diversity in terms of personalities, because we all bring strengths to an organisation. What I do see there, though, and this quite often happens, is that the D's and the I's, so those outgoing styles, if we think of, so I practice DISC, which is Dr. William Marston, and if we think, people often talk about extroverts and introverts, and that's Carl Jung's theory, so I try not to mix the two together, but some people, obviously it's much easier. The extroverts, those outgoing people, we verbally think. So when we're asked a question, we verbally think, we answer much quicker than those that are reserved, the more introverted people. They internalize the question, so they will take a little bit longer to answer that question. So quite often when I see it, and not so much as a poll, but definitely in a comment section, I tend to find that the D's and the I's are in a lot quicker, and then the S's and the C's come in afterwards, because they like to make sure that they give an accurate and correct answer. That would
Yes,
all.
if we can hide the results now, that's great, because I think we got the gist of that. So thank you for that, and thank you for our organisers behind the scenes that are launching that poll. If only it was magic. So thank you, Sheila and Lucy, for doing that. So it worked to treat these live events, no nerves at all. So that's great. I've got a question at this point. I'd like to encourage the audience to bring questions, and we are going to move into the second segment of today's webinar. Where we'll hand over back to yourself, Vic. But you mentioned the book earlier. We've had one comment come in. Can you remind the viewers what that book was? I think referencing the book from 1928. Was it about normal people?
Yes, Dr. William Moulton Marston, who in 1928 published a book on the studies of normal people. Um, Another thing, he was also actually instrumental in the polygraph, the lie detector, him and his wife. So that's another thing. And actually, fascinating subject or fascinating fact about him is he invented Wonder Woman.
There you
Nothing.
go. Let's see the
Well,
information you get on IWFM webinars. It goes beyond the brief. That's all I can say.
if you remember though, Wonder Woman, she had the lasso of truth, didn't she? And she got the if there was a villain or something, she'd catch them with the lasso, and then as soon as the lasso of truth went round, and they couldn't help but tell the truth. So it's all about lie detectors, truth, personalities, being true to ourselves. Look at
So
that. You get.
that what I've done there is remind our viewers we have got a Q&A session. So thank you for bringing that question in reference in the book. So we will go on to the Q&A later on in the episode. So Vic, because of time and I don't want to eat into it, I will hand back to yourself. Go to the second segment of today's webinar. So thank you.
Fantastic, and thank you all for responding to that poll as well. That is one of these things when you're doing these things virtually, you're thinking, I can see, the hundreds of people that are actually watching. Please take part, because it makes me feel so not alone. Because if any of you know me and any of you recognise my style, I am I style, and as a leader, I am I style. Now, what does that mean? Well, I'm a blend, and my blend is actually ID. That is my style. But when I go under pressure, how do I change? Well, I actually go from ID, the I comes down, and my D goes up. So you might actually be thinking, where do you change? And I know that I change. And whilst I try my hardest to make sure that I retain that inside, I'm going to give you a little example of 2020, because let's face it, the pressure was on for all of us. For any of you that don't know me, my husband has a small construction company locally, and bi-weekly on a Friday, I take the site meetings with him. So in the summer of last year, I needed to go to this site meeting. Now, bearing in mind what kind of pandemic or whatever word you want to use it was for last year, I'm here in my new home office studio. Isn't it lovely? It's great. I'm not out. So, first of all, there's pressure on me because I'm not actually getting out to see people. That affects me. I'm under pressure because now I've got online programs that I need to deliver. I've got proposals I need to send out. I've got profiles I need to send out. It's just me at the moment because the people I work with aren't around me. Haven't got the support that I need. I'm under pressure. So I'm going to this site meeting, and I've driven to this site meeting, and I came across some roadworks. Not one set of roadworks, no, two sets of roadworks, both with four-way traffic lights on. And those traffic lights weren't in my favour. So I'm also thinking I'm going to be late. And again, those of you that know me, I can't abide lateness. Timekeeping is a massive value to me. Whilst sitting in a traffic light, my husband phones. Sorry, he didn't phone me, hands-free and legal in the car, so I probably pressed a button like that. And he's asked me if I could collect some materials on my way to site. I'm running late. I don't want to collect materials. I'm going to be even later. The next thing I know, I'm having a spat with my husband about materials. So by the time I've actually got to site for this site meeting, I'm under pressure because I've got lots of work to do here back at the head office. I'm running late because I've come across traffic lights. I'm also had an argument with my husband, which has not put me in a good mood. So I'm 15 minutes late. And in order to get to the welfare area on site for the meeting, I've actually got to walk through site. So my eye has come down, my normal me going through site going, hi, how are you? Yep, how's the wife? How's this? How was your weekend? That eye's come down and this D has come up. And I've stormed through site going, where's your timesheet? Who's left this in a mess? Why is there a cable on the floor? And I've walked in and I've sat down. My husband has then joined me in the welfare area. And he just looked at me and said, the next time that happens, when you feel you're like that when you get to site, you get back in your car and go home. You have just wiped the atmosphere off this site. We've had a great week, we've had a great morning, and you have just. I know I change under pressure. And that can happen. And how do I manage it? Because it's really hard. Now, I want to think about another great leader, and this is when I want to talk about personality types as well. So to me, 2020, let's talk about a leader in lockdown. Now, I am a Joe Wicks fan, body coach fan. Didn't he do a great job leading PE in lockdown? He had the kids up, he had the teachers up, he had the parents, the grandparents. Blimey, he also had me, the auntie, up doing it virtually with niece and nephew. And that was great because he got everyone going. However, if you do know Joe Wicks, you know that in March he fractured his hand. So therefore, the PE that he continued to do, but it just didn't have any push-ups in it, didn't have any press-ups in it. And then in May, he actually had to have an operation on his hand. He couldn't do PE. How, as a leader, was he going to let down all his followers? That's not Joe's style. He couldn't let people down. So what did he do? He got his wonderful wife Rosie to do all the demonstrations of the moves. He still turned up to give the PE lesson, but his wonderful wife Rosie joined in and she did the demonstration because they needed to carry on, because he felt the pressure to do that because he is a great leader. Now, again, if you follow him, know him, I think most people do, you would probably put him up here in the outgoing people side, up here in the I style. Now, I have to say, I'm really fortunate that I've actually met Joe a few times. And I would agree, his persona, his outside persona, his public persona is definitely I style. But his private persona is, sorry, his public persona is I style. I got that wrong, didn't I? But his private persona is far more S style. He's actually far more reserved, still on the people side, but more on the reserved side. But he brings up his I style when he's being in his leadership mode. So leadership isn't about being in a box and saying who's a better leader and who makes this leader and who makes that leader. It's about understanding where we all are, what it takes to be a leader and what it takes to stay as a leader. Because we could talk about celebrities and famous people. We could go back to Martin Luther King. I mean, wasn't he a great leader? He got all these people to follow him, and there wasn't even such a thing as Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter back then. We didn't even have the internet, did we? Excuse me 1 second. I get so excited. I do need some water. Just proving that we're live and I'm human. But what Joe has, what great leaders have, they have those three things, don't they? They have a purpose, they have belief, and they have passion. And we need to remember, what is your purpose? What is your belief? And what is your passion? What is driving you as a leader? Because when we go under pressure, we need to remember that we still have a purpose, a belief, and a passion, and we can't lose sight of that. What happened the last time you went under pressure? Can you remember? We've got to think about this last year, because that's been the biggest pressure cooker point I've ever known. You had an argument with your partner, that gets a bit of pressure, a bit of stress. Homeschooling, whoever wanted to be a teacher? But you've got homeschooling. Perhaps you've got aged parents. Perhaps we've even got someone in the family with COVID. We've got these pressure points. If you're going to an office, the trains, the pressure to wear masks, the queues for the supermarket, the traffic lights are red. When it's all starting to get on top of you and you're under pressure, how do we change? How do we recognize it? And I'm not saying that as leaders, we can't let off steam, because we have to. It's like a pressure cooker sometimes, isn't it? We have to do that. But we need to make sure that we're not doing it to our followers. And as I said at the start of this, being a leader is not about the title on your business card or your resume. A leader doesn't mean you have to be the CEO, on the board, in the C-suite, even a manager. We lead and we influence the people in our lives, those around us, and they want to continue to follow us because we are great leaders. I know if I ever go to a site meeting with my husband now, no matter how much, I always leave a bit earlier now, but no matter how much pressure I'm under, the team, the contractors and the subcontractors on site don't want to see the D style in me. They want my I style still. That's what I've got to do. So if I need to let off some steam, do it somewhere else. Take a deep breath, do whatever you need to do. Listen to some music, deep breathing exercises. Watch a 5-minute funny on YouTube that makes you really laugh, brings those endorphins out and back again, or just do a Harry Potter and get under the stairs and scream. We need to make sure, and I want the whole Q&A to be around, when was the last time you were under pressure, and how do you recognize when you are under pressure? But also, let's go back to the DISC terms, in terms of how, in DISC terms, can we be great leaders and understand the opposite styles to us? Because when we're under pressure, the D style, the greatness about the D style, driven for results. Yes, their directness, courageous, they are competitive. But under pressure, what does that look like? Well, actually, quite frankly, that can look a bit demanding, a bit pushy, a bit reckless, sometimes even rude. And the I style, as a leader, the I styles, their enthusiasm, the optimism, persuasive, they're imaginative. But under pressure, can that perhaps come across as a little bit over-promisey, a bit showy, a bit emotional, perhaps unprofessional and irritating? And the S style, the value to the team, the fostering that team mentality, the teamwork, the harmony, the stability, the status quo. They're good listeners, they're amiable. But under pressure, can that come across to others as a bit slow, a bit lacking initiative, perhaps resistant to change and reluctant, even shy? And the C style, they are cautious, critical thinkers, their accuracy, their high standards, their orderly, their logic, that's all the greatness that they bring to the team and the organization. But when they're under pressure, does that perhaps come across as a little bit indecisive, a bit critical, a bit picky, paralysis of analysis, perhaps a bit cold? You see, we all have our benefits to the team, but when pressure hits, they can be seen as the opposite. And what we don't ever want this to do is to come across as direct, intimidating, shy, and cold. We want to stay as dominant, influence, steadiness, and comply. We want to be our disc styles. So how can opposites work with each other? How, if I'm D style, how can I get S style to follow me? Because if we look at polar opposites, this is where conflict can lie. The D styles, in order to get your S styles to follow you and be part of your team, then you just need to make sure that you recognize that they need stability. Yeah, it might be slow it down a little bit. There's change coming. Take them on the journey. They'll come with you. And how is the other way round? The S style, how do you get the D styles to come and follow you as a great leader? Well, actually, give them some power and authority. Give the authority to them, and they'll come with you. They'll help and support you. And then the I style with the C style. So this influential person here that doesn't really care too much about detail, rules and regulations, merely a suggestion. How do they get the C style? Well, again, it's by recognizing it, adapting yourself, and taking on board perhaps some of that detail. And the C to the I style, whilst you want to give over all the facts and the figure and the data and the information and everything behind it, actually just think about, well, if I give them the high level, they'll come with me and I can get them to influence other people. So it's not about changing who you are, it's about recognizing who you are, recognizing your leadership style, but recognizing those around you and how you can adapt your style to get the best out of other people. Because great leaders, you know, we could talk about them all. We can talk about some great leaders. I mean, if we look at the C style here, you know, Bill Gates, typical, and he's a great leader. He's just not in everyone's face, but he's a great leader in what he does. The S style, well, we could look at people like Mother Teresa or Lady Di, all about the people, great leaders. And the I style, Richard Branson it's a typical I style. It's all about him and his face and his brand, but he takes everyone with him. And well, without talking politics, I would have put Bojo up here in the I style, but since he's become PM, he's far more D style. You're never going to get him seeing him on that zip wire that he was on before, was he? He's jumped over far more D style now because he's changed his leadership style. And D, or let's not even talk about Donald Trump. That's not even going there on that one. We are who we are. And I want you to think about the last time you were really under pressure. How did you change? Did you recognize that you changed under pressure? And how have you adapted yourself? Because we need to think, another bit of water, again, showing I'm live. We need to think about ourselves in flow. Everybody expects us to show up consistently who we are, but we cannot help the pressures around us. Now, if you're in a meeting, and whether it's on Zoom or whether it's on Teams, wherever it is, whether it's face to face, if you're all in a meeting together and you're trying to get to a decision, and you know that, you know, there's some pressure on making this decision, you probably know the styles that are with you and you know how people are going to react, and you get the job done. But what happens when you come to a meeting and the pressure has come externally? That is where the big gap can lie, because we need to make sure that external pressure that comes with us, we don't bring into the room. I mean, how many times have you said to people, oh, don't bring your problems to work with you? We do, because we carry them with us. How can we recognize them and manage them so that we don't? But also as a leader, how can you recognize and manage your people, your team, those around you, maybe people senior to you, have got pressure? Can you recognize when they're under pressure, and what can you do to support them? Because I can't see this whole lockdown situation changing quickly. This let's face it, I'm not an expert. I am no COVID expert, but I don't think it's going to disappear like the Spanish flu like that overnight. God, wouldn't it be lovely if it did? But I don't think that's going to happen. So we need to think that the pressure is on. You know, that there are people who've been made redundant. There are people who've got new jobs. There's lots of things going on. How can we affect the work and environment that we've got now? In fact, I want to ask as well, how many people are going back to working in the working environment? FM is everywhere, isn't it? We are on the front line. We're not just the office. We're in every place, everywhere. If you're FM and you're in the hospitality industry, that's huge pressure because hospitality is falling apart. But if you're FM and you're on the front line, there's huge pressure because of the pressure that's actually just on the services of the front line. FM is everywhere. Pressure is everywhere. How do we cope with that? Peter, I'd like to bring you back in because I really would like to get some Q&As on here as well. More water. I promise it's
Right.
water, not gin as well.
No, we let you get some water. That's outstanding, Vic, in the terms of going through this as I promised at the outset. Very interactive session today. So hopefully, as we proved from the poll, a lot of people got involved with that and demonstrating. So we've had questions come through. I still want to bring as many questions in. So I still encourage listeners, viewers to send questions in. But I got one to kick off here around. I guess it's an intriguing question about this term corporate zombie. I think it's something that came up about 5-6 years ago. It's a term I had read up about I guess how people leave themselves outside the office, that they don't show themselves, but they bring in almost their personality that suits that corporate. Now, I guess from that perspective, the disc profiling showing people's behavioural traits, but how much would you say from your clients that that's been encouraged of bring yourself to work rather than live up to what maybe people might perceive that respective organization want you to be? From your client work, Vic, do you see that and obviously see how DISC is a benefit to maybe overcome that rather crude term of corporate zombie?
Yeah, I don't like the term. It's the word zombie, I think, in there. It's about wearing a corporate mask, if you like. Yeah, I get it, and yes, the disc. So the system that I use gives you 3 graphs. It gives you on autopilot, so you as you wake up. It then gives you how you feel you are perceived in your working environment. Assume you've answered all of the scenarios under a working environment. And then the middle one gives you under pressure. Now, where your natural autopilot and your perceived work changes, that is like you becoming a corporate zombie. That is you putting on your corporate mask. And the only thing that I would say with that is it's not natural for you. I am ID, autopilot and work, I'm ID. Under pressure, I become DI. My C is just, on the floor. And I know that I can't change, because what it does for me is if I have to become somebody that I'm not, that is either going to stress me. Yeah, it's either going to cause me stress because I'm having to work in such a different area than I'm actually used to, or it's actually going to frustrate me because I've got skills and I've got behaviours that aren't being utilised because I don't believe my role needs it, therefore I'm not utilising them. So it's either stressing or it's putting pressure on. And I feel we need to be who we are, because when we're all just working naturally in flow, then life is so much easier, isn't it? You get home and you've got, oh God, I've had such a stressful day. If I had to sit in a room inputting spreadsheets all day long, I'd be exhausted. Yeah, because it's not my natural style. Yeah, whereas actually doing a webinar, being on stage, talking and speaking is natural for me. I thrive on it. So does that answer your question, Peter?
I think, yeah, it certainly does, and I think from that there's quite an interesting point. I think you did allude to this point about the blend, and you've divulged from yourself you're a D and I. I've got an interesting point, and out of respect, I'm not going to give the individual's name because they might not want to know, but there's sort of ties in with your storytelling. I can see why you're an I around the time you went on site at your husband's site, and the scenario of the story that happened and led you to behave in the way you behaved. But this individual that's kindly put in a request is that they've divulged their D, which 29% of our audience are, but under pressure they become more D. How do you deal with that? And I think you gave some scenarios of how you dealt with that situation, but as I say, this is live. We do not edit the questions. So Vic, I don't know how you could answer that one. That we've got an individual there that under pressure becomes even more D in their humble view.
No, and you know what? Can I just say thank you, first of all, to that person for admitting it? Because there's a lot of people that wouldn't want to put that down. And I get, not sharing who they are. But D's, they're demanding, they're driven, they're dominant, they're doers, they're direct, they're decisive, and they've got great value to the team. Under pressure, they have a fear of failure. D's have a fear of failure. And so under pressure, especially if there is the thought of failing, I get the D goes up. But all that does is that to the people around them, that then becomes the person who is pushy and demanding and rude and reckless. And you need to recognize how I need to bring my D down. It's things like, bite my tongue, breathing exercises, or find another D and actually find someone who's not involved, someone's not a follower, not a team, who you just need to let off that bit of steam so that when you go back into your team, you're back down to where you are. Does that
Yeah.
answer the question?
I think it does, and hopefully the listener or person that put the question in is still listening. So just still drop us a comment in if you've got any further views on what you've heard, of course. Ties in very nice segue to another question, and again, I'm not going to divulge people's names, but this individual says, I'm an influential leader and can be very goal-driven and pushy under pressure. Guess what? Guess what? Guess what? They are a D. But how do I help not transferring this pressure to my team? And how do I help them manage their best behavior under pressure? So knowing fully well that pressure can be transmitted if not properly managed. So a nice segue on that question there. How do you almost, from a negative that could seem pressure, try and bring the best out of people? Because sometimes you need that pressure to be more goal driven or see a different side of an individual. So I guess that's where the question's coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like, under pressure, I know that I change, but how do I not put my change onto my people, and how do I bring my team into me? Well, first of all, again, it's recognizing yourself, recognizing the blend within the team as well, because if we're all a blend of all the different styles, but if you've got dominant I's and S's and C's in there, if this is coming from, was this coming from a D style, did you say again, Peter?
They haven't actually divulged that, but I've been very, very rude by being goal driven and pushy under pressure. I've put them in the category of D, but they may not possibly be. But do not worry, I have not divulged their names, so I haven't
I
offended
think you did
anyone,
say
I
that they
hope.
were inspirational leader that becomes a bit goal pushy, and
Yeah,
I get
yeah. That's probably a
that. So
better way of putting it.
when you know who you are and when you know what your team makeup is, what you need to do is you need to use your team to their strength. So when you recognize that actually I'm an inspirational leader, but I'm under pressure, so therefore I know I'm becoming a bit more direct and demanding. So what I need to do is find my other I stars, my other inspirational people in my team, and they need to come and help me continue that inspiring, inspirational part with my team. Yeah. If I am C style, yeah, and I know that actually under pressure I go from C style to perhaps S style or perhaps D style, I need to look around at my team and find my other C styles in the team who can come and make sure that the compliance, the correctness, the detail, the critical thinking is done for me, because I'm under pressure. I need someone else to take this off me. And you can only do that by understanding what your team makeup is. You know what you are, but what is your team? Because understanding others is incredibly empowering, but understanding yourself is what's powerful, because you can adapt yourself.
Yeah,
Is
we've
that
had a lot of questions flooding through. This is great, by the way, but I'm aware of time, and a lot of them I'm trying to put into almost a framework, but we're having a lot of people indicating that my team's an S and I'm a D. How do I get the S's coming out of the shells the same as a C? So how important, I guess, is adaptability this in terms of your leadership style? Because again, I'm happy to divulge to the audience, I'm an S, and I'm glad you used Mother Teresa there, because my parents will be very happy about that link to a leader. But I guess how do you adapt that? I guess the adaptability is key here, because people tick differently. We're all different. Our behaviours are different. How do you get that adaptability in your own leadership style? Is that the key, or is there more to it?
No, well, okay. So number one is awareness. Number one is awareness of your own style. And like you say, you've got people saying, I'm a D style and I've got S's. Now do I get them to come out of the shell? Being aware of your style and those around you, you need to know what it is that motivates the S style. What is it that the S style loves? They love a bit of security and peace and harmony. And let's face it, they haven't had security in the last year. It was work from home, when bang, tomorrow, that was the S style. What they don't need now is back to the office when Monday, you know, you've got to take an S style on a journey of going. I mean, Peter, I'm talking to you because you are an S style. You need, okay, you'll do change, but I want that journey. S's aren't shy and want to come out of their shell. S's, amongst others, they foster a team mentality. They care about the people around them. Like I say, they make great diplomats. You have to use that strength in your S. Make sure that they've got that to use. Give them some security. Get them to do the teamwork for you. Give them that bit of responsibility, and they'll love it. You've got to, like I say, understand the strengths and what motivates that. To motivate an I style, just say, great job. Give them some praise. They'll do more. They'll do better. S style, it's about, like I say, it's the security. And the C style, they're motivated by systems and procedures and facts and data. They want more of that. D styles are just motivated by power and authority. Understanding what motivates the team, you can give more of that to the team and they will follow you more as a leader.
And Vic, how much of this is relating to coaching? Obviously, I can use a sporting analogy, and every good coach and book, and I won't divulge too much, that I used to be a football coach in a former life, and adaptability of that coaching style for a players or a team sport, how you get the best out of that individual. How much is there an overlap in this? Is that the key link of getting to know your staff and how they operate? And DISC is one way of getting you on that journey.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I won't hold it against you as being a coach of a football team. We've
I
all
won't
got our.
divulge who it was, because I might lose listeners and viewers, but I'll keep that a secret. I'll divulge on another episode.
Well,
So no, I've got another question here, Vic.
let me just answer that one for you, Peter. Absolutely. Coaching is all about being a great leader, because you can't blanket manage everybody the same. You can't just have 50 people in your team and manage everyone the same, because they're all different individuals. You need to understand them so that you can adapt your managers and your leadership style for each individual person to get the best out of them.
That's great. And there was a link to my question, and not just divulging I was a football coach, but there's a question coming in that I work in a business which is very process driven to risk. I struggle to see how the I style fits into business DNA, but the comment goes on to say, I wish it did. So how important is a business now from a recruitment point of view that you do get the versatility of, I guess, that behavior? Is that so important? Is there a danger of, so for example, I can't divulge, I don't know what this business in terms of their profile is, that you could have a business that has, I say, too many D's in it? Is that a risk, or am I overthinking it as an S
No, no,
does?
no. No, you're not overthinking it at all. We can't all be, if a business has got all D styles in it, all they want to do is drive and lead and everything else, but who's actually doing the work? The I's, great. They all want to go out and influence and inspire everybody. Again, who's doing the work? The S's are, they're making sure that everyone comes on board, but actually who's out driving the business? and influencing the business, and the C's, it's all compliant, it's all facts, and it's all data. That's absolutely great. But who's driving the business forward? Who is going out to talk to your clients? Who's making the sales? Because diversity isn't just about cultures and stuff. Diversity is about personalities and behaviors. We all have a part to play in business, and business needs every type, every style to make it move.
And I've seen so many organisations in the first point of the question around the recruitment process. I guess from your point of view with clients, how have you seen, and there are other techniques out there in terms of that competitive world, how important is this behaviour, personality to understanding how people fit into a culture of an organisation? So how have you seen DISC work, and how you haven't seen it work is another question that's come in.
So did you read my article in last month's Facilitate magazine, may I ask, Peter?
Of course, that's a nice plug for those that haven't seen it. There is an article in Facilitate on this.
And it is. So I've seen people use, and it's not just this, there's loads of psychometric profiles out there. I don't like the word test because that says that suggests a right or wrong. What it is it's not about using it once people are in and understanding them. Use it at the start of the process. And one of the things I wrote about in Facilitate was about actually how can you profile a role when no one's even in the role, by doing a 360 round it. Get 3 people who are impacted on that role to say what they believe the behaviours are of that role, and then you do a Venn diagram, take out the middle bit, and you use that in the interview process. So start the process. Your cultures, your values, what are they? You need to ask that in the interview process, because how many times do people go for the job and they're like, I really want the job, I really want the job, and then they get the job and they're like, this isn't anything that I thought it was going to be. And how many times do people interview and they go, I really want that person, I really want that person, and then they come and then they go, well, they weren't like anything that they interviewed. Being honest and open and understanding cultures, understanding values, understanding personalities and behaviours. Start with that, and it makes it a much smoother process, because it's a costly thing, isn't it? The whole recruitment process.
Oh, definitely. One of the biggest costs, and probably even more paramount in the economic, social times we find ourselves. So, Vic, you did allude about timekeeping being one of your bugbears, and I'm afraid to say I have to wrap up the Q&A at this stage. But any questions that have come in from listener viewers, I will pass on to Vic, and we will get back in touch. But a massive thank you for those that did send questions through, and as I say, we try to go through as many of them as we can. But at this point, Vic, I want to say thank you very much for a stellar webinar, in my view. Very interactive. We've had a lot of engagement. Hopefully some lessons learned for individuals understanding their own profile, but maybe even adopt it on your team in terms of this profiling, get to know your staff, understand how they operate. But the key there, as you said earlier, this isn't to put a label on individuals. There's no right style. We're all different at the end of the day, and that should be embraced, not seen as a problem.
Absolutely.
Vic,
And I was going to say, I'm on most social media platforms, LinkedIn, Insta. So if people haven't answered anyone's questions, please come and find me and pick up the phone. It would be great.
that's great, and thank you once again. So for listeners, there's not too many slides left, you'd be pleased to know. So thank you again, Vic. The Insight Hub, a very important aspect for our members and non-members. This is where you will see dedicated content hubs, latest research reports, good practice guides, guidance notes, as well as our 33 episodes, of which this one will shortly be up for you to play back and cascade to friends, colleagues, and watch back if you want. So please do. Also linked to COVID, I'm afraid we do manage and the guidance side of things on this. So this is regularly updated to give latest guidance on policy, as well as the return to work. As Vic alluded to, many of our members never left work under the circumstances of workspaces, but a very good resource to keep you updated in the COVID-19 aspect through these challenging times. And moving on, I just want to say a massive thank you to the audience. Again, taking an hour out today, we try and listen to the feedback. So we do have a survey that's going to be passed to you shortly, not only to rate this webinar, but to look at future episodes. And we're not going to stop here on the leadership thing. This is definitely an area we want to explore further. There's different techniques, there's different books that have been recommended by some of the listeners today. Again, it's an area we want to explore, but this really drives our future episodes. So we'd love to hear from members, non-members, in terms of one, how you rated today's webinar, but probably more fundamentally, what you would like to see next. And that really drives. So we've listened, we've acted, and hopefully you've enjoyed today's webinar and our future episodes, of which next week's will be announced on Friday. So we do have one next week, our 34th episode. So once again, massive thank you to Vic O'Farrell, an excellent webinar in my view. And thank you once again, listeners, viewers, for joining us today. And as always, take care and keep safe. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for having me.